Hey class, it's Gabriella. Today for my speech I will be discussing GMO foods and whether or not they should be labeled, because I feel like it's just such a common topic nowadays that it definitely needs to be discussed in order to, pick which side you want to choose, whether you're for labeling or not labeling. You need to understand why I feel that they should be labeled. What are GMO foods? What is a GMO? GMO is an acronym that stands for Genetically Modified Organism. According to the Non-GMO Project, a GMO is a plant, animal, microorganism, or other organism whose genetic makeup has been modified in a laboratory using genetic engineering or transgenic technology. This creates combinations of plant, animal, bacterial, and virus genes that do not occur in nature or throughout traditional crossbreeding methods. GMO foods are so widespread, yet many consumers are unaware of how these foods are produced because labeling of GMO foods that has yet to be mandated in the United States. Being that this is such a common topic of the present, it is important to discuss the pros and cons of GMO food in order to understand why these foods should be required to be labeled as such. Diving into what exactly GM foods are, they are genetically modified organisms that have had their genomes changed in a way that does not happen naturally. In other words, it is a food produced in a laboratory, and I don't know about how you feel about that, but in my opinion, it doesn't sit well with me. According to an article titled, "What is a GMO?" posted on yourgenome.org, any organism could be genetically modified. Many foods are genetically modified, with the most common being corn, soy, yellow crookneck squash and zucchini, canola, sugar beets, and milk. These foods are pretty common ingredients and can be found as a listed ingredient in other foods. As a consumer myself, I take comfort in knowing what is exactly that I am consuming, which is where the labeling of foods comes in handy. In order to understand the need for labeling GMO foods, it is vital to be aware that there are both pros and cons for these foods. An article on greenandgrowing.org lists the pros and cons of GMO foods, and I must say, the pros unfortunately do not outweigh the cons. Some of the listed pros of genetically modified foods are that they have the ability to help consumers who have allergies. Food allergies have increased from 3.4% to 5.1% between 2009 and 2011. Since allergies are increasing among consumers, it is getting difficult to find food that they can eat. In fact, it has been noted that there is less reaction to foods with GMO ingredients than to those without. Next on the list is quality. To begin, the food tastes better. Their DNA has been modified and they are stronger. The taste and color have been enhanced as a result of the modification, and GM foods can last longer on the shelves and in our homes. The enhancements save the company and consumer money, so this is a win-win. However, there are cons to genetically modified foods as well, such as contamination. Like all seeds, GMO seeds will cross-pollinate. This is creating huge economic losses for the farmers that are growing organic and non-GMO crops. Since their crops are growing outdoors, it is nearly impossible to keep their crops pure due to the cross-pollination of GMO seeds with their organic crops. Another downside to genetically modified foods is increased use of herbicides. Although it is true that the GMO seedlings are strong enough to reduce certain chemicals, thus reducing the necessity for herbicides, their cross-pollination is creating super weeds that are also resisting the effects of chemicals. In addition to this, the production of these modified foods is causing environmental harm. Genetically modified organisms have reduced the biodiversity of ecosystems. The number of monarch butterflies has dropped 50% in the US due to loss of habitat. Furthermore, GM seeds and their associated herbicides are harming birds, insects, marine life, and amphibians. The chemicals that are within the modified organisms are also impacting the stability of our water. All of these listed cons are red flags and reasons why it is important to label GM foods. Consumers have the right to know what their food is, let alone how it is produced. This is why GMO food should be labeled, so that the consumer is aware of what they are consuming and can decide where they stand on the subject. According to an article titled, "Even if GMOs are safe, mandatory labeling is a good idea," it states, a New York Times survey found that 93% of Americans believe foods containing GMO ingredients should be labeled. Not to mention, consumers are demanding assurance that food products are safe. Opponents of GMO labeling say it would be expensive and raise costs for consumers, but the reality is that 64 other countries have GMO labeling laws and food prices haven't increased. Consumers haven't stopped eating GMO foods, they simply have more information about what it is in their food and how it's produced. Genetically modified foods are so common nowadays, yet some consumers are unaware of what they are purchasing and consuming because labels are not yet mandated in the United States. Consumers have every right to know what it is that they are purchasing for all the reasons previously stated. Not to mention the cons outweigh the pros, and many other states, such as Vermont, that have mandated the labeling of GMO foods have seen benefits amongst the consumers and companies.